All right. Today we're going to talk about, we've been graphing um, equations of lines, and now we're going to talk about writing equations of lines. But first, let's kind of do a little review. So I'm going to graph this equation, y equals 2x minus 3. This is in slope-intercept form, right? So that's my y-intercept. So I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to count off my slope, which is up 2 over 1. Up 2 over 1, or I can count it off down to back 1, and then I can draw my little liney poo, and there's my equation, y equals 2x minus 3. Now with this equation here, my initial point is -4 and +3, so I can graph that, -4, +3. And then I can count off my slope, which is right here at -2/3, so I'm going to go down 2 over 1, 2, 3, down 2 over 1, 2, 3, and once again, get out my little guy here and draw my line. Cool. Now let's talk about finding the equation of a line going through these 2 points, right? So in both cases, I need to know my slope and a point, which I already know 2 points, or I need to know the slope and my y-intercept. So in either case, I need to find my slope first. So I'm going to use the slope formula, which is just this, the y-coordinate of a point over the x-coordinate minus y over x. So in this case, I'll do 3, which is the y-coordinate here, minus 7 over 2 minus -4, which will equal -4 over +6, which is -2/3, because we always want to reduce our fractions. So now that I have my slope, I can go ahead, using point slope, I can just write my equation in point slope, right? So it's where I have the y-coordinate of the point, the slope, and the x-coordinate of the point. So I'm going to write it in 2 different ways. First, I'll write it with this point, 2, 3. So I'll say y minus the y-coordinate equals -2/3 x minus the x-coordinate. Or I could also write it using this point, -4, 7, in which case I would say y minus 7 equals -2/3 x plus 4. There are my 2 answers. Okay. Or I could write it in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Now, my m, I can plug in my slope because that's the same for all of them, -2/3 x plus b. Now I need to solve for this, and I do that by plugging in one of these points. I'm going to use this one just because it's got no negatives or anything. I'm going to say 3 equals -2 times 3 times 2 plus b. So I just plugged in the point 2, 3 in for x and y, and I just plug those in, and now I can solve. So 3 equals -4/3 plus b. Now I'm going to add 4/3 to both sides. Well, I know that 3 equals 9/3, and 9/3 plus 4/3 is 13/3 equals b. Beautiful answer. So now I have my equation, y equals -2/3 x plus 13/3. And there's my solution. Now, this is one of those instances where mixed numbers can be really nice, and I can turn this into y equals -2/3 x plus 4 1/3. Because it's a lot easier to graph 4 1/3 than 13/3. But I actually like this answer a little bit better. Cool. So now let's kind of go through and look at all of these, look at a few more problems here with that idea. So write the equation of the line given the following points. You can choose either point slope or slope intercept form. It just kind of depends. Now, so here I've given 2 points. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my slope. And that's going to equal -2 over 2 minus -1 is +1, so that's 3. So there's my slope. And because I just have 2 points, it's going to be a lot easier to write it in point slope. So I'm just going to go for that. So there's my slope, and I'm going to write it in point slope. So first I'll use this point. So -3 equals -2/3 x minus the x-coordinate minus 2. Or I could write it using this point. So that's this point. Or I could write it using this point. Y minus 5 equals -2/3 x plus 1. There's that one. Now let's go down here. Now these points look kind of special. We know that intercepts have coordinates that are zeros, right? And this would be my y-intercept because my x-coordinate is 0. So knowing that, I'm going to use slope-intercept form. But first we got to find the slope. So I'm going to say 2 minus 0 over 0 minus 3 equals 2 over -3, which so my slope is -2/3. So I can say in slope-intercept form, because I have my y-intercept, I know my b is equal to 2 and my m is equal to -2/3. So my equation would be y equals -2/3 x plus 2. That was pretty easy. All right. So here we go. Here we have an equation. I've got 2 points. I'm probably going to use point slope, but let's see what happens here. So I've got 6 minus -2 over -6 minus -6, which is 6 plus 2 over -6 plus 6, which is 8 over 0. Uh-oh. So what this means is that I can never divide by 0, right? So the slope of this line is undefined. Because we don't know how, there's no way of knowing how many times 0 goes into something, okay? Now, in this case, this is actually, if we go over here and we actually graph this line, -6, 6, and -6, 2, -2, and we graph this line here, we can actually see that it is a vertical line, right? And we know, as I look at this, I think about, well, what's the same in every single one of these points, right? So this is -6, 6. This is -6, 2. If I keep going, this is -6, 0, and this is -6, 2. The negative x is the same in every single one of these points. So this would be the equation, x equals -6. Cool. Now let's look at, so this is a kind of a special case, right? Where it's a vertical line, and we're going to say that x equals -6. And if we look back at these points, right, the x coordinates are the same in both of them. And that's how we know that it's going to be a vertical line. Okay. Now, let's move on. So we've got another set of points here. Whoa, this point looks kind of interesting. that's my y-intercept, and that's right at the origin here, right? And so that so I can find my slope, and then I'm going to use slope-intercept because I know that this is an intercept, my y-intercept. So let's find my slope. -3 over -3 minus 0 over -2 minus 0 is -3 over 2 of -2, which is positive 3 over 2, right? Because these negative signs cross each other off. Okay. So now I'm going to have my equation y equals, my slope is 3/2 x, and my y-intercept is just plus 0, but I can write that as y equals 3/2 x. And I could actually graph that real quick. Up 3 over 2, up 3 over 2. And then I can graph this. Now, let's take a look at this equation, right? So there's that one. So once again, I've got 2 points. This is an x-intercept, so I may or may not use point slope or slope-intercept. Let's look at this. Y equals 3 minus 0, so I use this, my y-coordinates, and 5 minus 2, which ends up being 3 over 5 minus 2 is 3, which equals 1. So I have a slope of 1. And then I can go ahead and put this in point slope. So I'm going to say y, so using the point 2, 0, be y minus 0 equals 1 x minus 2. Or I could use this point, 5, 3, and I would get y minus 3 equals 1 x plus minus 5. Okay, so there are 2 possible solutions there. Now let's look down here at this one, and let's go ahead and graph this point. So we've got 2, 0 is this point here, and up 1 over 1. Okay. Or I could say 5, 3, which is this point here, up 1 over 1. And then I can graph that. Okay. 3, 2, so I got this one, this one. Let's go ahead and finish up, and then we'll graph these 2 points. Now, let's look. This is kind of interesting. So in this case, both of my y values are the same, right? So in other words, if I graph just those 2 points, I would have a horizontal line. And if I find my slope, -4 minus 2, then I would get -5 minus 5 is 0 over -6. So that's just a flat line. This 0, 6, -6 is just 0, right? And as we look at this point, as I look at this, right, I can see all my y values are the same, and so this is going to be the equation y equals -5. So there's that equation. Now, we still need to graph, so these ask us to graph on the axis below. So let's graph these last 2 lines, okay? First I'll graph this one. So this is the point -1, +5. That's that point here, and the slope goes down to over 1, 2, 3. And I can graph those lines pretty carefully. Okay. So this is y minus 5 equals -2/3 x plus 1. Now let's graph this line. Y equals, so I have a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of -2/3. Now, so ideally, we would recognize that, hey, these two lines have the same slope, right? And hey, look, they're parallel, right? Same, and actually these two lines, that kind of looks, these are actually perpendicular, right? And this is the equation right here. This is the equation y equals 3 halves x. And this is the equation y equals negative 2/3 x plus 2. And so if you look at this relationship between the slopes, right? So this is the slope negative 2/3, and this is the slope 3/2. And these have created perpendicular lines, okay? Which we know this because they're opposite reciprocal slopes. Okay. All right. Well, that's kind of our guided notes for today. Hopefully, everybody can work on that. So then, what I want you guys to do is just work with your neighbor on answering all these questions. Okay. And then you can go on to homework, to do the homework in Canvas, or in ALEKS. Thanks a lot.